record, ma'am?
Lori Chato, 430 Continental Street, Forked River, New Jersey. On January 26th, I sent an email out to most of you. Ms. Stevens, Mr. Schlick, Mr. Coburn, Mr. Ken, Mr. Gormley, Mr. Lewis, Mr. Shelley, Mr. Brady, Mr. Rumpf, Mr. Seco, Mr. Orris. I was in search of a conversation regarding our property. I'm here tonight with my family. We're the owners of 470, 480 Mathistown Road. It's the property that is located between the Lutheran Church and the Cara Homes Winding Run development. Unfortunately, I didn't get a single email or phone call returned to me, and I did happen to hire my attorney to continue to call you for the entire month of February, to no avail. He did call 11 times. We did get one call back on the 9th of March from Mr. Orris. Unfortunately, it did not facilitate the sit-down kind of conversation we've been in search of having. So I stand before you tonight to have this conversation. It's factually accurate. It can all be supported by recorded deeds, letters from the township resolutions, purchase contracts. It's a story that not only affects my family, but affects this entire community. And it must be told. Each of you as members of the current governing body may not have been witness to any of these events. I understand that and I respect that. But you are the people that hold the power now for a solution now. And a solution is what I'm in search of tonight. The history of this property is an integral portion to the future of this property. And it's one that I'm asking that you just give me a minute or two to explain. We purchased the property in 1974, 50 acres along Mathistown Road that were then zoned for R150 and R200. We spent several years hiring architects, engineers, going back and forth with the township in an effort to try to develop a piece of property for its residential use. Rules and regulations were changing. Things became a moving target. We were not able to accomplish much of anything, but we continued to pay our taxes. 15 years go by and we hit 1989. Little Lake Harbor spot changed the zoning on this 50-acre property to a new zone called Office and Professional, ONP. Simultaneously, Little Lake Harbor increased our taxes 347% overnight. It went from $4,900 per year to $17,000 per year, a 347% increase. Your tax records will confirm this. Immediately thereafter, we began to generate a conversation with the township in September of 1990. We had to discuss the hardship that was placed upon our family, and we submitted an application for an informal review with the township engineers in order to oppose this change, to cite its devastating effect and its crippling limitation for use. Our property was rendered useless with a single swipe of somebody's pen, and it's simultaneously a 347% tax increase. A letter came back to us, and I do have a copy here, and I have copies of everything that I'm going to mention right here in my file, from the township engineer at the time, McSweeney and Drews, that addresses our desire to change this zoning from its original residential zone to the OMP zone. The framework of his letter states, the OMP zone was intentionally proposed to allow for low-intensity uses so as to preserve the wooded pristine character segment of Mathistown Road. This gentleman stated in his letter that it was changed to OMP in order to preserve the pristine wooded nature of the land. He, of course, made no mention of the 347% tax increase that came along with it. The zoning change to OMP and the tax increase would stand. Reasonable minds might conclude that the township did not want this land developed. During this time period in the early 30s and the early, 1990s, Theodore Chun was the planning chairman, and he was requested to my father to come to his house in order to discuss matters further in regards to this issue. Of course, my father respectfully denied. Shortly thereafter, as you may recall, the township began political restructuring due to the criminal arrest of the planning board chairman, Mr. Chun, along with two other township officials at the time. Mr. Chun was placed in jail and sentenced to 4 years with $30,000 bail for admitting to taking bribes and conspiracy to take kickbacks. The mayor at the time, Robert Tychaz, was sentenced and sent to jail for 3 years for accepting bribes from developers, and committeeman Richard Arose got 6 months for illegally using his political influence. As a side note to this, Mr. Chun had served on the planning board for the prior 12 years to this, which almost takes us straight back to the date of our purchase of the property. The next 10 years go by. We spend it continuing to pay our taxes. We have been 100% taxpayer to the Township of Little Egg since 1974, never miss and never were late. We spent the next 10 years trying to figure out a way to develop our land that was locked into this new O&P zoning in a town that hadn't had an office and professional building built in 30 years. So we listed the property for sale. In 2000 and 2001, we had 2 separate developers at 2 separate times, Stone Builders Inc., Newfield Developers. I have their offers with me. That presented each to make sound offers for the purchase of the 50 acres, $1.1 million. Each deal was naturally contingent upon township approvals to develop into residential homes. We worked closely with the buyers, who worked closely with the township. Each buyer was ultimately denied from Little Egg for residential construction. All deposits were returned. This brings us to 2002. Mr. Thomas Whelan of 829 Radio Road made us an offer to purchase 40 acres of the 50 acres of our property in the amount of $854,000, $250,000 less than we had offered the year before, offers for the year before. There were no contingencies attached to this deal. So we agreed because we are tired. At that point, we're tired from this. We close. This leaves us with the remaining 10 acres of land that you see vacant between the church and the Carroll Run Home Development. Mr. Wheel and Mr. Mazzina immediately proceed to transfer ownership of these 40 acres into Winding Run Associates, LLC, also located at 829 Radio Road, for the exact amount of $1. It goes on to acquire township approval for residential construction. The very same residential construction that we were denied twice, 2 years before. The property is then sold by Mr. Mazzina and Mr. Keelan to Carroll Homes Residential Construction, along with another 36-acre parcel of land behind ours, for $9.1 million. I have all of the deeds of transfer with me. With no regard to the township engineer's prior declaration and rezoning, in order to maintain the wooded, pristine character of Mathistown Road, the very one that crippled my family financially and continues to do so, they proceeded to clear the interior of every single tree in its entirety. And they built the homes that you see there today. Reasonable minds might conclude that the Winding Run Associates may have had some connections or even had their eyes already set sight upon our property. In 2003 and 2004, we approached Carroll Homes in order to explore any interest that they might have in purchasing our remaining 10 acres of land. While they expressed their interest at first, they ultimately declined their pursuit with us due to lack of township cooperation. Reasonable minds might conclude that Winding Run is no longer involved in that property in order to help push approvals through. In 2005, as we all read in the paper today, Mr. Mazzina of Southwinds Conflict secured township development approval for 168 townhomes off of Mathistown Road. The land is currently being purchased from Mr. Mazzina by the Ocean County Land Trust for $5.5 million. And this property will no longer bring the much-needed tax income to Little Egg. 205 to 214, subprime mortgage crisis happens, Hurricane Sandy happens, and everybody gets crippled. Nothing moves, except we continue to pay our taxes. In total, we are now up over $290,000 in taxes paid to Little Egg Harbor on this land. In 2014, the HMFA, the New Jersey Housing Finance Agency, places Little Egg Harbor at the top tier to provide affordable housing. for those families that may have been displaced by the storm, and for those families with moderate lower income. We are approached with an offer to purchase our remaining 10 acres of land by the Walters Home Group for the purpose of developing 60 to 70 units on this 10-acre site, as mandated by the state. Walters Homes meets with Little Lake Harbor, discusses the possibility several times with its officials, and is first very encouraged. But then at last, they are denied, and the deal dies. Little Lake Harbor also simultaneously begins to hear its application for the Oak Lane development of low to moderate income housing, funded by the same hurricane program. The board in this town, the planning board, decides to deny the application, as you are probably well aware, then goes to the courts. The Superior Court of Ocean County oversees it, and they are now given permission to build at the site. 3.5 acres for 60 units. Little Lake Harbor becomes part of a class action suit along with several other municipalities that try not to have to provide any affordable housing as it's required and mandated by the state. I'm certain that this probably will be appealed or is in an appeal state already with the Township of Little Lake Harbor, but I also know that Judge Troncone is the captain now when it comes to this. In September of 2015, 8 months later, from their conversations with Walters Homes, a Little Lake Harbor Township official reaches out to Walters Homes and asks if they still have access to our 10-acre site for the purpose of this type of construction. The Walters Group approaches us again and gives us an offer that we do not accept because we already are in a partnership with another development group. We're looking to possibly develop the HMFA units, or even considering 80% adult community units with 20% of moderate income units, which would be a much less dense site than the 3.5 that were approved around the corner. The problem is we can't get a meeting. We are trying to get a meeting just for discussion in light of what has happened in the last 41 years with our property. In November and December of 2015, our partners, Mid-Atlantic Engineering, speaks with Little Egg. They also come and meet with Little Egg. They are again ultimately denied the right to build any type of housing on this property. And the township denies to provide us with the township for a resolution of need for the HMA-funded development. The April 8th was the cutoff date for this funding money. I believe the Oak Lane project got $9.1 million of no cost to Little Egg in order to build those houses. Another deal dies. January, February, March, and April of this year, I beg this board for a conversation to help. I send an email out to everyone and additional people just to sit and speak with us. I stand here now before the governing body in search of direction. I stand here asking, what can reasonable minds conclude from this? How long can one individual taxpayer bear such an unbearable burden? $290,000, soon to exceed $300,000, on top of tens of thousands of dollars in engineering, lawyers, land use specialists, legal fees, consulting fees. How is this just? How can this be allowed to happen right out in the open? We pay our taxes. We play by the books. We work by the rules. We've been subject to misdirection and corruption for 41 years. I ask if this current governing body can organize a sit-down meeting with the right people in order to open a conversation for the future direction and the fair development of our land. That's my question to you tonight.
Should be no question.
I mean, what's the ultimate question? What are you want to sit down and have a meeting?
You don't want me to start from the beginning?
No, I mean, there's a lot of discussion about things that happened 40 years ago, changes to the zoning.
Correct.
When the zoning is changed, you have a right, I'm sorry.
I'm asking for you to point me in the direction of the
Excuse me.
officials to sit and speak with
People in the
you.
audience,
don't add to the conversation unless you're at the podium, because you're always shouting our township attorney.
Wow.
Decorum, please.
I do understand your legal background would first put me in a situation of that I can't bring any of this information into my question tonight. But I think as you see, and most of the audience sees, that the history of this property is an integral part of the future of this property. And to try to sit down in a fair fashion with anybody that can point us, help us, work with you to properly develop the property. We want a conversation. We want to sit across the table and have a conversation.
Conversation can occur, definitely. I know that, you mentioned, I did take a note that when your builder came and approached the township and you were denied the right to build. That's not actually what happened. That's not true.
Well, sure it is, because I'm in the construction business.
There was no application to build anything. I think what happened was, I don't know if you're aware what's going on with affordable housing, but the township had to submit a plan by December 8th. We had to submit a reasonable plan that the special master would approve with developments that were likely to happen, and residential developments. And as you said, your property is zoned not residential.
You don't
GB
remember.
right now. General
You
business.
don't
General
remember.
business.
Office and
Right, that's not a
General
current,
business now.
that's not a current zone. I was just looking through the code. O&P is not a zone. General business, I know it's not
General business.
residential. We couldn't submit a plan in December with residential units in a general business zone. And
Mrs. LeBeau, I've been in the construction industry for 40 years, and I've developed certain pieces of property, and my experience has been such that you always have a informal conversation with the township before you extend the money that it costs, which we did for the first 15 years of the property, and we did continue to do along the way. We did hire the professionals. You understand you have to dig extremely deep into your pocket just to get before a board. You always sit down with an informal situation to try to please and appease what the township wants done with the property and what we can do for the township.
Okay, I'm just saying.
It always takes place before a formal application can get submitted.
There was no denial of the right to build, but there can still be conversation.
There was a dissuasion of the right to build on multiple accounts, and I think that I sort of made that pretty evident here. So I am asking to sit down and have a conversation to figure out what it is that we can do to exercise our right to develop a piece of property that we were denied on many occasions, where another application came in less than a year later and got approved for a zone change, along with degrading the pristine nature of the road of Mathistown. I just want a conversation. I have the letter from the township. I can give you anything that you'd like to see. But it came from the township engineers. That they changed it to an OMP zone, if I might remind you, in order to maintain the pristine character of Mathistown Road. I'll tell you exactly what that was. I really do not look to this board to go back and feel as though you have to offer an opinion as to what happened and why it happened. I stated the facts of what happened. I'm looking to the board now to sit with us in an amicable, amenable way to figure out what we can do as a family to hang on to this property, to try to regain and recover $300,000 of taxes alone on the property since 1974. I need direction on how to move forward and the best way to do it. And I'm getting the date for you of the letter.
Excuse me.
Yes, my name is Lori.
Lori,
Yes. Yes, Mayor.
well, besides that, it's being anyway. But I think your request is reasonable.
Thank you.
So I reach out to Garrett to contact the township planner,
Okay.
review the current situation, and absolutely have a conversation with you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So
As
I
soon
will
as
call
possible.
Mr. Loesch on Monday morning, and you're gonna take my call, and hopefully within that week, maybe we'll sit down and I'll bring my partners, my development partners with us, and we'll have a good conversation. Is that something I can expect? And if it is, and this has been a very successful night.
We will certainly arrange to have that meeting
Thank you.
as soon as possible. I can't sit with any.
I'll talk. I will talk to the planning, township planner tomorrow.
I think reasonable minds can conclude within the next week, maybe 2, would be fair. Okay, McSweeney and Drew's letter dated September 25th, 1990 is where it states, the narrow framework of the O&P zone was intentionally proposed to allow for low-intensity uses so as to preserve the wooded pristine character of this segment of Mathistown Road. The only way to avoid this is to strictly allow additional uses as conditional uses which conform to the O&P performance standards.
There were two master plans since then, correct?
Yes.
2009 and 2008, there have been subsequent.
I believe at this time there was no master plan for almost 10 years.
No, there was a master plan in 2008, there was a master plan re-examination in 2015.
Right.
Both
This
of
was
those-
1990, so we were outside of that, yeah. Okay.
And those master plans going back in time, I can't recall all those dates.
They were recent.
And both residential, obviously, a portion of your property was sold off.
Right.
Was obviously, it was a split lot, a portion of it, which was GB, a portion of which was residential. A little bit before my time,
Of course.
that, there was case law and I think a lawsuit over the township's ordinance that allowed someone, if they wanted to build within a split lot, that they could choose the larger size, correct? If it was more of it was residential, they could build residential. And that's the way the law was that.
Well, Mr.
Both of
Leon and
those-
Mr. Mazzino Winding Run acquired 80% of our property at the time, and you can see, I believe it's 100 homes or more that are back there now. And just for the record, the remaining 10 acres that we have on the land, we pay over $17,000 a year for, still now, and that's only 20% of what there was. So time is of the essence.
I just do have one question.
Sure.
That's just for my own curiosity. Why didn't they purchase all of it?
That's a very good question, and I wouldn't be able
Or
to
perhaps
answer.
why did you guys make that part of it? Kind of works
I
both ways, I
can't-
guess,
can't-
but.
Engineer, I think you answered it. If you had a split lot, you were able to go towards the
And that could be.
residential. If you bought the whole thing, he would.
Mr. Gormley, I really couldn't speculate in all honesty as to why, but when you've gone through what you went through at the time, and now you have somebody willing to purchase your property for $854,000 with no contingencies, and you're as exhausted as we were as a family at the time, you take the offer.
Yeah, no, I'm
So,
just curious.
it's a
as
great
to
question.
Why
That's a great question.
you take the development.
Which is why I can tell you that we did go to Cara after it was transferred over to them, and they did build successfully their units. We did, in fact, approach them to see if they were interested,
Just
so.
curious, so.
Common sense would say, right?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.